Researchers once asked people to sit alone in a room for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, nothing to do but think. 2/3 of them chose to electrocute themselves instead. Not metaphorically, literally. A mild electric shock, pain, was preferable to being alone with their own minds for 15 minutes. Now here's the part that should disturb you. On the other side of the world, the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last groups on Earth still living the way humans lived for most of our existence, spend hours every day sitting in the shade, watching, resting, doing what looks, to a Western observer, like absolutely nothing. And in their entire language, there is no word for boredom. Not a rough equivalent. Not the close translation. The concept does not exist. Neither does it in the Piraha language of the Amazon. Nor in dozens of other languages from cultures that have maintained original human lifeways. Anthropologists have documented this repeatedly, across continents, across decades. And every single time, Western researchers are genuinely shocked. Because we assumed boredom was part of being human. It isn't. Boredom is something that happened to us. Something recent. Something that requires very specific conditions to exist, conditions that your ancestors never lived inside, and that we have quietly, almost accidentally, built our entire modern world around. And once you understand exactly what those conditions are, two things will happen. You'll understand why the most cognitively sophisticated species in the history of the planet now can't sit alone for 15 minutes without reaching for a button. And you'll understand what we actually lost. The thing ancient humans had that made silence not just bearable, but something they moved toward. That's what this video is about. You are carrying 1,400 grams of the most complex object in the known universe, an organ that took millions of years to build, shaped by one relentless pressure. Keep this body alive. That sounds simple. It was anything but. Picture a morning 50,000 years ago. The sky is still dark at the edges. Your body is barely awake. But your brain already isn't. Those tracks from yesterday, which direction did they lead? The weather is turning. What does that mean for the group? The child who was coughing last night. Is it serious? The river was lower than usual. Every single morning was a continuous, layered, high-stakes puzzle. Not occasionally. Not when something dramatic happened. Every morning. The environment wasn't a backdrop to their lives. It was their cognitive life. There was no separation between living and thinking about living. And that gap, that specific distance between experience and the observation of experience, is exactly where boredom lives. Your ancestors never had that gap. We've made it almost inescapable. But what specifically changed? And why does it matter that an entire emotional state, one that now defines modern life, simply didn't exist before? That's where it gets strange. Here's what boredom actually is, and the definition is not what most people expect. It isn't the absence of things to do. Boredom occurs when a person wants to engage meaningfully with something but cannot, either because nothing meaningful is available, or because their attention has become so fragmented that nothing feels meaningful anymore. That second part is the one worth sitting with. It's not about having nothing to do. It's about a brain that has lost the ability to care. Your ancestors didn't have this problem. Not because their lives were dramatic. Most days were slow, repetitive, and physically exhausting. But because every single task was directly, viscerally connected to survival. There was no question about whether finding water mattered. Meaning wasn't something they had to manufacture. It was embedded in the act itself. Now picture this. A hunter crouches in dry grass, perfectly still. He's reading a set of tracks, maybe a day old, maybe two. The ground tells him things. The depth of the impression, the distance between steps, whether the animal was walking or beginning to run. He is not trying to concentrate. He is not fighting the urge to check something. Every part of him is doing one single thing. That state has a name in modern psychology. Researchers call it flow, total, effortless absorption in a task that demands everything you have. And what they've found is that it requires one specific condition. The challenge must sit just beyond your current ability. Hard enough to demand everything. Achievable enough to keep going. Your ancestors lived inside that condition almost continuously. Neuroscientist Jake Panksepp called this the seeking system, a core emotional circuit that floods the brain with dopamine not when you receive a reward, but during the pursuit of one. When you're tracking something, solving something, moving towards something with real stakes attached. This system is the opposite of boredom. It feels like aliveness. And here's the dark irony. We haven't lost the seeking system. We've redirected it. Picture someone lying in bed at midnight, thumb moving in a small, repeated arc scrolling. Not looking for anything in particular. Not expecting to find anything meaningful. But unable to stop, because stopping means sitting in the silence the scroll was designed to fill. The dopamine loop still fires. But without real stakes, without embodied effort, without anything connected to actual survival, it fires and leaves nothing behind. The hunt ends. The screen goes dark. And somehow you feel emptier than before you started. The second thing ancient humans had, and this one is less obvious, was full sensory presence. Not as a practice. Not as something they cultivated. As the simple, unavoidable result of having nothing competing for their attention. Here's what that actually looked like. A woman sits beside a river in the late afternoon. The light is changing. She isn't meditating. She isn't trying to be present. But her eyes are tracking the surface of the water, the way it moves differently near the bank, the ripple pattern that means something is beneath it, the level against the rocks that tells her whether last night's rain reached the hills upstream. The river isn't background noise to her life. It is information. When you sit by a river today, your brain is rarely actually there. It's running background processes, the message you didn't answer, the thing you said last week, the notification you felt 2 minutes ago. Psychologists call this stimulus saturation. Your attention has been so thoroughly colonized by artificial inputs that natural environments can barely register. There's a concept in attention research called soft fascination, the gentle, effortless absorption that happens when you're in a natural environment with no particular goal. Watching clouds, looking at fire, sitting near moving water. Researchers have found this state is profoundly restorative. It replenishes exactly the cognitive resources that directed, effortful attention depletes. But it only works in the absence of competing stimulation. Introduce a notification, a background podcast, a screen, and the effect collapses entirely. Your ancestors lived in perpetual soft fascination. Their brains recovered fully, every single day, from whatever the world had demanded of them. Ours are running a deficit that never fully clears. But that wasn't the only difference. The third piece is the one almost nobody discusses. Social immersion. For 300,000 years, humans lived in bands of 25 to 150 people. You slept near other bodies. You ate alongside them. You worked beside them for hours without needing to arrange it or schedule it or show up for it. You knew the name, the personal history, and the current emotional state of every single person in your world. And, crucially, they knew yours. Chronic social disconnection produces a pattern in the brain almost indistinguishable from a chronic threat response. The isolated brain believes it is in danger. It becomes hypervigilant, easily overwhelmed, and extraordinarily vulnerable to boredom, anxiety, and a creeping sense of meaninglessness. Psychologist John Cacioppo spent decades documenting exactly this, mapping the biological cost of a brain that evolved for constant social contact and instead receives almost none. Because here's what boredom and loneliness share underneath the surface. They are both signals. They are your brain issuing the same complaint in different words. This is not the environment you were built for. Something essential is missing. Your ancestors never received that signal chronically. Not because they were happier or more enlightened, but because the structure of their lives met their social needs automatically. You didn't choose to connect. Connection was the default condition of being alive. Now here's the question that takes all of this somewhere unexpected. Ancient humans had long stretches of time where nothing was happening. The Hadza rest for hours. So what were they actually doing during those hours? If it wasn't boredom, what was it? The answer came from sleep research, of all places. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health took a group of volunteers and removed all artificial light from their lives. 14 hours of darkness per night, the way humans lived before Edison erased the night entirely. Within weeks, every participant settled into the same pattern. 4 hours of sleep, then 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness, then 4 more hours until dawn. Nobody told them to do this. Their bodies simply remembered. Ware measured their hormone levels during that wakeful window and found something remarkable. Participants were producing elevated prolactin, the hormone associated with deep calm, with meditation, with a particular quality of stillness most modern people never reach. They described the state as peaceful, reflective, present, but unhurried, a state Ware concluded that most modern humans have never experienced. And here's what your ancestors were doing in that window. Not seeking stimulation, not filling silence. They were lying in the dark, a fire dying nearby, thinking about their lives, turning over the day, sitting inside their own minds the way you sit inside a room you know well, unhurried, unafraid, completely at home. That isn't boredom. That is the opposite of boredom. That is a brain fully, quietly occupying itself. Here is what all of this actually means. Boredom is not a sign that you need more stimulation. It is a very precise measurement of distance, the gap between the environment your brain was built for and the one you actually live in. You have the brain of a creature designed for meaningful uncertainty, for genuine social belonging, for full sensory presence, for problems where your intelligence actually changes the outcome. Every time boredom arrives, it is not your brain malfunctioning. It is your brain filing a complaint, in writing, about a specific injustice. Ancient humans didn't solve boredom with productivity systems or dopamine detoxes. They didn't need to. They were too busy being fully, presently, uncomfortably alive, and we built a world safer and more comfortable than anything they could have imagined. We just forgot to check whether our brains came with us. And maybe, the next time you reach for your phone in a quiet moment, that's worth sitting with for just a few seconds longer.